Hi there, thanks for joining us today. I'm Rebecca, Operations Manager and Regulated Canadian Immigration Consultant at Moving to Canada. I'm joined today by my colleague Steph, who is our Head of Content Strategy and is responsible for making sure you all know what's going on in immigration, settlement and career landscape in Canada. So every year, hundreds of thousands of students apply for a study permit to study in Canada, but more than half are refused. In fact, according to recent data, nearly 290,000 applications were denied in 2024 alone, with a record high refusal rate of 52%. So why are so many applications refused? We're going to break down the top 3 reasons why study permits were refused in 2024 and how you can avoid the same mistakes. So while this data does come from 2024, it's safe to say that these reasons for refusals remain relevant today. And although this report focuses on study permits, many of the same factors apply to work permit applications. So this discussion will be helpful for anyone looking to apply for temporary status in Canada. So we're going to start with the top reason. So the number one reason for study permit refusals in 2024 was due to the officers not being convinced that students would leave Canada after their studies.
Right. And this reason is relevant to all temporary resident applications. So that's study, visitor, and work permits. The officer who is reviewing your application must be satisfied that the applicant, probably you, will leave Canada at the end of your authorized stay. Although dual intent is allowed, meaning you can plan to stay temporarily in Canada while also hoping to apply for permanent residency later, you must still demonstrate that you will leave Canada when your temporary stay ends. What officers are usually looking for here are things such as a previous travel history showing that you haven't overstayed in other countries, proof of financial assets outside of Canada, and significant family ties outside of Canada. These all show strong ties to your home country. Rebecca, since you've completed a lot more of these applications than I have, do you want to go over some of the ways applicants can strengthen their application here?
Yeah, so it's all about demonstrating strong ties to your home country. Even a country which isn't your home country can always be a bit harsher as well. You want to make the officer know that you have ties and reasons to return home. So that can include family ties. So whether you have dependents, parents, or other relatives that rely on you back home, that's a great way to show that you have a need to return to your home country. Properties or assets. So if you own property in your home country, that's also another great way to show a strong tie to that country. Employment connections, for instance, you might have a job offer from your home country still. So if you have proof that you have continued employment once your studies are over, that's another great way to show that you have a need to return to your home country. Financial stability really is one of the biggest ones. So showing that you have savings or income sources from your home country, again, it shows more willingness or likeliness that you'll return to your home country if you have financial stability there. And travel history. So if you have a history of traveling outside of your home country, but returning to your home country and not overstaying legal status anywhere, that's another big one. If you don't have any travel history, you might be 18 years old and not traveled that much, then generally that's not as big a deal. But if you're older and haven't traveled or have overstayed, that could be a tough one to overcome. So you just want to make sure you address it in your application.
Yeah, that's super helpful. So looking through the data, the next big reason that people's study permits are denied is when the purpose of the visit isn't consistent with the temporary stay. I think a common issue here is when your chosen study program doesn't align with your past education or career path. So officers may assume you're just using the study permit as a backdoor to stay in Canada rather than going after something that's like a genuine academic goal that really furthers your future either in Canada or your home country. To avoid this, I guess people just choose a program that clearly connects to their background and future plans, and then they explain it in the statement of purpose. Is that the plan there?
Yeah, so when you apply for a study permit, and I guess this can be certain true for kind of work as well if you have a job offer for something that's not related completely to your past. But specifically to study permits, the statement of purpose gives you an opportunity to explain where you're coming from to the officer. So you'll need to explain why you chose the program and how it builds on your past experience. And if it doesn't build on your past experience, why you're making the switch. You can also highlight why you chose that institution specifically. In both cases, you'll want to address why you have to study that program and at that institution, and why you can't pursue a similar program in your home country. So always connect your future studies to your future career plan that you plan to undertake when you get home. Show how a Canadian degree will help you in your career goals in your home country. Just make sure it's consistent in the logic.
You mentioned in there that you can overcome the not perfect alignment with your past versus your future plans. So I guess, say in my situation, I studied law in Australia and I've ended up in writing blog posts. Say, during that transition, I wanted to study in Canada. It would be possible for me to write a statement of purpose that explained why I'm doing that? Or would it always have to be like I'm going to study a Master of Laws in Canada kind of thing?
No, I've seen many cases where the choice of study has not been related to past studies or past employment. It just takes a lot of planning and wording to really make sure that you're identifying why that program and how you thought about that program will help you in your future endeavors kind of thing. But it's much easier, obviously, if your program is aligned with your past experience. If it's not aligned with your past experience, you'll have a harder time, but it's not impossible.
Okay, perfect. And then finally, I think it was around 18% of refusals would be the third highest reason. The officers refused it because the applicant had insufficient financial resources for tuition and living expenses. I know that it's really important to show that you can support yourself and any family members that come with you. And I know that IRCC provides clear thresholds for proof of funds. I regularly write updates about those being increased at certain intervals. And I also know that the required amount depends on how many people are included in your application. So is it just a matter of being like, this is how much money IRCC needs, I will submit a bank statement showing that amount of money, voila, I meet the requirement? Or is it a little bit more complex than that?
No, I think that would be really the bare minimum and you would still risk a refusal. The objective here is to show strong, consistent funds, not just that you've landed on a pot of gold and now you're okay. So you want to show that you've had a steady balance, that the funds have been available to you and will remain available to you. So to address financial concerns, you should concentrate on providing detailed, reliable proof of funds that show consistent balances. If you've had an influx of money, you'd have to explain that. You want to make sure it's clear that this came from this activity that I did. I sold my car, for instance. If you have a scholarship, show the documentation. It can get tricky when you're using someone else's funds. So if you're relying on a relative's funds, that can be a bit harder to show that you have access to that money. So you're going to include the bank statements, 6 months of bank statements from your sponsor, a letter from your sponsor showing statements saying that these funds are available to you. And if it's a family relation, so if it's a parent or if it's an uncle, it's worth showing that you are related to them. But it is tricky when you have a relative paying on your behalf, especially if you're a bit older. And if you do have evidence of ongoing income, so if you plan to work whilst you're a student, showing your pay slips, for instance, and showing that you have access to an income can help this. But it is an area that you really want to take the time to make sure you've got really solid proof. You mentioned, Steph, that they do have the thresholds. I wouldn't recommend submitting an application if you just reach the thresholds. I would give myself a buffer to really show that you have this strong financial footing. To summarize, the top 3 reasons study permits were refused in 2024. So not convincing the officer that you're going to leave Canada after your studies, the purpose of your visit, and you have insufficient financial resources. There are other areas, so you just want to make sure you have, on the whole, a really strong application. So showing strong ties to your home country, clearly explaining your academic goals and providing solid financial proof, you can improve your chances of being successful.
Remember, every application needs to tell a story. So the more consistent and transparent and well-documented your story is, the easier it is for the officers to assess your application and see your genuine intentions. Mm-hmm. So take the time to prepare your documents really carefully and explain your choices clearly. It really can make all the difference. On that note, that's all we have for today's recording, but I would just love to plug our newsletter. I mentioned that I regularly write about funds being updated, and we just recently saw an increase in the study permit funds. So if you had been a subscriber to our newsletter, you would have seen that news land in your inbox in a very timely manner. I believe it was in our weekly roundup on Sunday. Subscribing to that newsletter, just head on over to the homepage at movingtocanada.com, and it's the first box you see there. Getting those updates in your inbox can really make all the difference when it comes to staying in the know.
I think we've seen more changes to study permits in the last 18 months than I have in 15 years. So
Yes, definitely.
Good one to keep on top of. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments.
Yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye.